And we're live with another episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on Twitter, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on social media. Man, I'm messing this whole thing up. Social media. Yeah. Seth, say hi. I don't know.
Hey everyone. Welcome back to another episode of something. I'm not sure what we're doing today. Appreciate everyone here. I'm excited to get into it this week. We had a good walkthrough last week from Ken on using LLMs to enhance code review. Just some examples of questions that we're answering using LLMs when we're looking at code bases. Super effective. So if you're interested in that, go check out episode 241. We probably will chop that up a little bit and maybe post some succinct advice as well. The code's available on GitHub as part of our handouts repo. If you're interested in that, ping us on Slack and we'll get you some more data on that. As far as upcoming events, places that you can see us, we will be at RSA in a couple of weeks. Actually, I can wait. 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks.
Right? Yeah, I'll be at B-Sides too. I changed my flight and my hotel reservations to within the last 48 hours. Actually, yeah, to go there. So, anyways, we'll see people at B-Sides too.
So B-Sides, RSA, the happy hour. We have posted that link in Slack. If you're interested, please come along. We'd love to see everyone. There's quite a few people that have signed up already. And then we have the next training opportunity that we have. It will be in June in DC, right? As part of DEF CON trainings. Let me grab the link there. That's going to contain all the AI bits, the LLM stuff that we've been using, that we've demoed last week, as well as some other hints and tricks that we have. I mean, we only had an hour last week, so Ken was flying through a lot of what we do, but hands-on wise, that's a better place to actually get into it and use the LLMs, use Olama, and just in general, enhance your own code review process. So there's the link for that. Thinking what else? Yeah. Outside of that, there's other training opportunities later in the summer. DEF CON training at Vegas, also in Paris, and later in the year. And we are planning on Melbourne in September. Still working out the details on what that's going to look like with Cole and team down there for his conference. But watch this space. If you're one of our, Aussie listeners, would be great to see you get back down there after 4 years now, I think, Ken? 5 years? Since last time we were down there. Yeah. So, we're excited about that. And I think that's everything right now. Am I forgetting anything, Ken? Want me to read some? Should we read some sponsorship copy? That's one thing I haven't done in a while.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Sure. We need some dry run. I'm going to read. So today's episode is going to be sponsored by Redpoint. Thanks to our sponsor, Redpoint. Redpoint Security specializes in code security for coders, bolstered by years of experience testing applications and conducting code reviews against all types of applications, including web, mobile, AI, and even Web3 apps. Redpoint also offers training to help ground your teams in better security practices across the development lifecycle. So check out redpointsecurity.com for more information and put your company on a path to better security. All right. Thanks to Redpoint. As always, the podcast in general is sponsored by Redpoint and by Dry Run Security. And the happy hour as well will be sponsored by Impart and Dry Run and Redpoint. So sweet. Today, I think we're going to catch up on news stuff. We do have guests that are scheduled to come on, I believe, even next week, if I remember right. Maybe not. My schedule's all messed up right now, right? But let me think. I don't even know. I can't tell right now if we do have somebody on for next week. We have guests coming. That's all, right? Watch this space. We'll be advertising out who it is, when it is, and other people to join the conversation. There we go. There's Aaron listening to us. Brian Schmidt is on next week. I knew there was somebody. So we'll be excited to have Brian with us and to get his take. Anyway, cool. Ken, anything else before we dive into articles or news?
No, I mean, I was out in Austin last week and I got to catch up with Evan Johnson.
Run
reveal. Yeah, we did a code dry run reveal dinner thing. So I got to actually hang out with them for a few hours. It was really fun I got to meet quite a few people last week actually. So it was really neat. It was a good time. Ate way too much barbecue.
As one does. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, seriously, it's Austin. What are you going to do when you go there? For me, it's barbecue. So they have Texas, especially has like the Dino Bone beef ribs that are just massive and anyways, I love barbecue, so it's really nice. But yeah, I don't really have much else. I am really looking forward to B-Sides, and so I'm going to drop another note about that. If you are going to B-Sides SF, hit me up. I'd love to meet up. I'm really honestly just kind of hanging out for a couple days. RSA, I've got meeting upon meeting, but for B-Sides, it's pretty chill right now. So if anybody wants to say hi or whatever, just hit me up, or I'll be walking around the conference.
Sweet.
No, I'm definitely excited. I got like so 2 more trips, and then I think I've got some downtime on trips for a little bit, so that's good.
For like 2 weeks, and then you'll start back up, I'm sure, right? That's typically
maybe
how our schedules go.
Maybe.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing that I wanted to talk about today, and this has been bouncing around all of there's 2 articles related, and Ken, I sent you the like one of the news articles about it, but I'm going to post the actual paper first, and then we'll talk about the response and your thoughts on it. The first is this paper on okay. So the name of the paper is LLM agents can autonomously exploit one-day vulnerabilities, right? I'm going to share this out. And then we'll talk about the responses and what you think about it. But let me drop it in there. I know it's been going around a lot of the Slack channels that we've been viewing, right? Let's see, is that the right channel? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so basically what has happened here and what the researchers are claiming is that ChatGPT-4 specifically is capable of exploiting 87% of the vulnerabilities that they've identified based on this data set of 15 one-day vulnerabilities that includes ones categorized as critical severity in the CVE description, right? So, they've taken ChatGPT, they've pointed it at specific CVEs, and they've said, can you go and exploit this, right? And they're saying that GPT-4 was capable of exploiting them, but every other model tested could not. Then they do some introductions. Let's see, benchmark of real-world vulnerabilities. Okay, so these are the ones, Okay, so these are the exploits that they were able to actually take advantage of. Okay, and these are the CVEs, whatever it is. Agent description, this is attack and response. They had GPT actually generate the tools, look at the CVE, and then run an attack that was generated by the LLM, right? So, I mean, it's kind of, yeah. Okay. So there's a number of issues here. So that's the paper, first of all. And my initial take on this, I don't know. Okay. So before I get into it, I know you've looked into it. You've looked at the response article as well. I mean, what was your initial take on, number one, this research, and number two, the results that came out of it?
Okay. Yeah. Let me move this screen from one to the other, or this tab from one to the other. Okay,
Yeah.
so just to kind of go over the summary. So the same researchers that released the paper "LLM agents can autonomously hack websites." Let's go back to that, because these are the same researchers. So I had posted that article. We talked about it. Eric Cabedas in Slack and I had a kind of a discussion on because his reaction was sort of like, this is nothing. This is a big nothing burger, and all of that and whatnot. When we had that conversation, I think my kind of take was the opposite, in that I was like, well, this is a something burger, but it's not as important as, it's definitely not what they're making it out to be, but it shows a couple important ideas or concepts about LLMs, LLM ecosystem tooling, and then like how it can be used, right? Which I'll go share my screen here in a second and show something. But all right, so now the author of the article analyzed, LLM agents can autonomously hack websites. Now they're doing the same thing for autonomously exploiting one-day vulnerabilities. The overall summary, I would say, on this is a very measured analysis and summary from this author about what they found. So couple points, there are things where it's like, well, actually, so for instance, when I say measured, it's like there are obvious times when, there was like a simple CVE to exploit and it couldn't figure that out, right? There were other times where, and so, that's pointed out. But I think what's interesting is also that, like, the author says, well, they said that they couldn't, I'm trying to find, hold on a second here.
So you want to check out that other, the other, hold on, I've got this other one too. So this is the response article. And I think that's what you're talking to.
Right? Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's what you posted the original article.
That was the original. Okay. So here is the response article. Right.
Yeah, there's a response article. That's what I'm reading off of. Because my initial take of the paper is very much in line with this author. Like, first of all, I do think, like, okay, let me really say this in a pretty blunt way. The first one was like, cool. You're like showing, yes, the title seemed a little clickbaity, or for obvious just people to view it, but overall, I felt like there was some cool concepts and all of that released in it. This second paper kind of destroys a little bit of my thinking on that. Now is what I'm trying to say, because once again, they went with a title that was not right. It was not accurate. It's not doing ODA. It's not doing ODA
development. It's
ODA development. It is doing what the author of this article points out, which is that it is it's taking bits of information together and using probabilistic analysis to piece together new code, essentially, based off of what it's been given. There were some hiccups here and there, stuff I would totally expect, like, if you don't give it a description, it doesn't have enough context to build out the things that it needs to build. It had some issues with Chinese text being fed in. It had, and then this is the one where I felt it was a pretty, measured sort of analysis. It's like, well, in their article, they said, they couldn't, for CVE 2024-25640, that the agents were unable to interact with the application because it's got a heavy client-side JavaScript front end, right? So, and his take on that was, well, it probably would do just fine with the right headless browser integration. So I think that there's, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's not like this review of the article is like, oh, this is just all garbage. It is a very, like, here are the good parts, here are the bad parts, of the article. But I just want to point out, I would say these researchers maybe want to dial back a little bit of the way that they're titling out these papers.
And they're making them
friction for themselves.
It is. I mean, they're sensationalizing this idea that an AI can go out and exploit things that it's already that are already known, right? And I mean, the research in and of itself, the steps that they're getting to actually have it go out and exploit these is great, but it's also, hey, we cherry picked a bunch of exploits or CVEs that already have exploit data attached to them, right? So you're not really developing O days, right? Or whatever it is, but it is speeding up the process. So I do want to give them credit for that, right? So similar to, hacking websites or whatever, right? Like anything that we can use to speed up our security analysis is great. And, at some point, right? Like, hey, can you exploit this system or this website using acid rain, right? Like their example that's in there. And if you can, and if you can ask an LLM or you can ask an AI to do that for you, why not? That's just it. That being said, right, it's the sensationalism that kind of kills me on it, right? And I think that's what you're driving at is, guys, right? Like everybody's jumping on this as far as like, 87% success rate and exploiting known vulnerabilities. Yeah, the cherry picked list of 15. All right. But that doesn't mean if you gave it all of the CVEs that had come out between the time frame that's listed, that it would get anywhere near 87%, because not all of them have exploits. Not all of them are, not all of them are automatable, right? So it's, yeah.
100%. Yeah. Well, and so I just real briefly too, I wanted to, if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen here.
Yeah, go for it.
With LangChain. So just real quick, this is the actual. They mentioned using LangChain's React and to do this. Now I want to explain to people exactly what React is, because we did do a walkthrough of like AI code and LangChain last week. I feel pretty comfortable moving into this next level of LLM kind of tool set. So React is really just a way to orchestrate agent and agent executors, which allow LLMs to effectively do things and get back the relevant information that they need. In this case, they're using, or in this example, they're showing the Tivoli search results. You can search LangChain's tools for like different, or its documentation rather, for different tools. You can make your own agents, by the way. There's a lot of customization that you can perform. And why that's important is, in this case, we're using Tivoli search results. We could make this, whatever we want. We could have our own custom tooling that makes web calls, or it, does whatever, parses some information from some source, or I don't know, does something, right? And that's what they chose to do in this research. And it's pretty simple, right? You instantiate an LLM, you create a prompt. This is just a default prompt. You mash those together and call it an agent, which is what we're doing. So LLM tools and prompt. The tools, it's the Tivoli search stuff. Agent executor, instantiate your agent along with your tools, and then it can be invoked like, what is LangChain? And so now you can see that you see your input, you see that it performs its search results, it gives you your search results. Fun times, right? All React is doing here, though, is it's just extending out the LLM so that you can basically orchestrate using LLMs things. And so that's really what they're doing here. It's not, I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's not really magic that we're talking about here. It's not some like, oh my God, LLMs are so smart, you can just feed them CV data and all of a sudden, or you can feed them whatever, and then they'll like be smart enough to create code that exploits it, and then start sending payloads to a website or whatever. In a lab environment, in a very highly orchestrated, highly tuned environment, I think that's 100% possible. It's not like that. Why would that not be possible? But you got to remember, what's the underpinning technology here? We're just talking about something that's going to do some level of token guessing, probabilistic analysis. It's going to mash together things based off of, context, inputs, whatever. And then if you allow it to use those formed payloads to then send the payload off to like a website, yeah, it's not, again, it's not magic, but it also doesn't mean that again, I've been using AI stuff in a production sense where it's a lot of data from a lot of different repositories, from a lot of different tech stacks. And I can promise you that it's not as simple as just like, I mean, they didn't even publish their code or their prompts or anything. So to give you an idea, and I can tell you, it's not as simple as saying like, yeah, I can just feed this. I'm not saying that's not something that couldn't be done over a long period of development with like huge team or whatever, but yeah, I guarantee you what they've got is essentially what any of us could build on a hackathon weekend. And your mileage is absolutely going to vary incredibly wide. So anyways, that's my way of saying it's cool, but stop with the sensational titles. And also like, for everybody else, understand that like what they're using is pretty basic open source stuff. It's cool, but it's not something, magic, I guess.
Yeah. It's not right. The one thing that this does point to, right? If you drop the sensational titles, you look at the analysis, you look at the work that's being done, and kind of play that out into the future. It's going to speed up this analysis and scanning that goes on for the wider internet, right? If I can have an agent go to a site and kind of profile what the site is running, and then use tools that I already have to look up CVEs and then look up the exploits that are on there, right? Like it is definitely going to speed up that process, and probably, there will be quote unquote hacks that happen because of LLM identification and exploitation. And then, honestly, if you were in the malware industry, you're probably looking at AI to actually help you identify these systems, right? And on the flip side, if you are protecting a large organization, you probably want to be using your LLMs, your AI, to know what your attack surface looks like, right? And speed up your own process. So that's what's coming, and which is why, again, I know you and I have spent a lot of time talking about LLMs over the last 6 months, right? And that's why this is the writing that's on the wall. It's coming. It's not only coming, it's here in a lot of situations. And if you're not taking advantage of it, you're going to get left behind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like, stop writing articles, stop writing papers with these titles that are hard for me to defend you on, because I'm trying, and I know you are too. We're trying to like, because when you say it's here, it is here, and like we're really trying to navigate the waters of what's real and what isn't for people. Since I do feel like we have a unique sort of ability to play in that space that maybe and use in like I said, like a production sense that maybe a lot of people don't have those insights or those abilities to mess with it. So anyways, we're just trying to but at the same time, man, stop. Yeah, I don't know. How do I say it any differently? Like, don't bullshit people, because there's enough noise as there is in the AI space. Yeah. It's like, please keep it measured.
Keep it measured, because it's the hype cycle, right? Like everybody's interested. So the second that you come out and you say like, oh, I was able to use an LLM to exploit like 87% of CVEs, of course a news organization is going to pick that up because it's something that they can promote and drive traffic with. And people will obviously, we're talking about it because we clicked on it because we're like, oh man, again, right? Like that's kind of what it feels like to me is we're like, okay, take it down a notch and let's talk about what's really going on there. And if you have questions on how to actually implement that and how to use it, there are resources that are out there, right? Like, you look at stuff like Jason Haddix is putting out, like how to use an AI, in your bug bounty methodology, and how to ask it questions and use it instead of using something like Google. And again, it's all about speeding up that process. The reason you and I talk about it from a code review perspective, it's all about speeding up the process of that identification, of understanding, using it as a quote unquote superpower, instead of going to Google and having to search through a number of different articles or whatever else it is. Doesn't mean that it doesn't have to be taken with a grain of salt, but it can help, and it will help in a lot of situations. And rant, I guess that's where I'm at.
Yeah. No, it's having the desired effect for them, at least initially. But I think it's gonna, like, this is the second article with that, and I'm like, all right. Like, I was forgiving the first time, and I think many people can be, but the second time I'm like, all right, it's not stop, knock it off, stop that. I mean, keep doing the research, just don't. Anyways, all right. I think we beat up enough on that.
Okay.
But hopefully people understand, and maybe I'll demo using the React framework to make web calls with an LLM, just so people can see what that actually looks like in production or in practice. But I definitely didn't have time the hour before this thing to do that. So
yeah.
Cool. You want to talk? Oh, go ahead.
Nope. I was just saying, yeah, well, the demos were always good. So
yeah, I was thinking about maybe the DataDog one next.
Cool. Okay. So this one came out. Yeah. This one actually came through TLDRSec from Clint. It was one of the items in his most recent newsletter. If you're not subscribed to TLDRSec, you should be. Just shout out to Clint and the work that he's doing over there.
Yeah.
But did you drop that into Slack as well? No, you did.
I did. Yeah.
Okay. Let me share this out, right? I'll actually present it. I'll share it on the screen here. We're taking a look at it. Okay, so DataDog. If you're not familiar with DataDog, it's a logging service, right? You send them data, and then you can analyze all your logs for whatever you want, right? But they're doing security research here, and the name of the article is just the state of DevSecOps. So what is being accomplished, what sort of vulnerabilities, what things that they are seeing across, probably tens of thousands of applications, as they say, and all of the logs that are being sent to them, right? And part of this is just to cut through the noise to see what's really important and what's really going on, right? I mean, in summary, right? Like, I've got it up on the screen right now. Oh, yeah, I do. Okay. But, in general, like, shipping secure code is a challenge. We all know that. That's the reason that we talk every week. And DevSecOps is one of those techniques that we use to actually make sure that code is secure as it's going out the door, whether that's like your dynamic scan, whether that's, dry run that's running against your code as it's going into Git, whether it's, short-lived credentials, like they're saying, all of these different things. But they're saying that the modern DevSecOps practices go hand in hand with strong security measures. Like, you've got to have some sort of security there to make sure that you are protected, right? Yeah. And, but that final statement is pretty good here, right? Our research also shows that while security starts with visibility, securing applications is only realistic when practitioners are given enough context and prioritization to focus on what matters without getting lost in the noise. And, you and I have been talking about context and priority for a long time. I mean, that's what we do in secure code review, but they're doing it from another angle here, right? And again, this is taken from like all the different applications where they see like vulnerabilities that are being popped in there, right? And okay, so their number one finding here, the fact from this research that did, Java services are most impacted by third-party vulnerabilities. This is obviously going to be tainted a little bit by their data set, right? Like, this is the number of applications that they're actually monitoring, and what their visibility into those applications is. Whether or not they're instrumented, they can see like the pom.xml for Java, and that's where they're pulling those vulnerabilities from. Because that's kind of what I'm assuming is they're doing a dependency check or a software composition analysis on dependencies, and then saying, oh, there's one or more critical or high severity vulnerabilities in these Java services. I mean, Ken, from your perspective, like, based on, the different languages and frameworks that are out there, like, is this Is this true to life to you? Is this the feel that you get that Java applications are more dependent on, insecure third-party libraries, or, are we looking at something else here?
God, I don't know. As somebody who protected many different tech stacks, I felt like they all had a fair amount of, like, when you subscribe to their security email list, they all had a fair amount of dependency related vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's, I mean, I will say, like, Java's been around for a long time, so there's probably a lot of Java, like, Log4j, right? Like, that had been around forever.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I just don't know if, like, I will say, I thought it was pretty interesting to highlight a bit here where it says 63% of high and critical vulnerabilities derive from indirect dependencies. That's the one that kills me the most. I think it kills us all, because it's like, yeah, obviously you have your intentional libraries that you want included, and then these things pull in, these other libraries, and you're like, didn't know I wanted those ones. Maybe I didn't want those ones, and they're here now. I don't know. I think, like, yeah, SCA is still a thing. Still.
Well, it's not going anywhere, right? Like, and 63%, like, I think in general, most vulnerabilities, like if you do an NPM audit, if you do whatever you're running, right, to look at your, software composition, finding those indirect dependencies is always difficult. And then they're very hard to, as a call out here, it's very hard to actually fix those, because it usually requires that the direct dependency be upgraded as well. And whether or not there is even an option to do that they've noticed that that's out of date, right? Like, you're dependent on someone else's analysis and process to actually, upgrade a dependency. Like, it's just it's a huge mess, right? Like, we've talked about it multiple times. It's a huge mess. I'm with you though on the reason that Java's higher in this list is just because it's been in use for longer. I don't think that there is inherently something about Java that actually leads to, more critical vulnerabilities, especially in dependencies. It's probably just that, hey, there's a lot of enterprise applications that don't get upgraded as much, and maybe aren't using something like, that are still using old waterfall methodologies, or are critical to the organizations that don't get upgraded. But they have these vulnerabilities that are in there. I think that's where I go with it, because I see vulnerabilities in every app that we look at, from a component perspective. There's always something that's out of date. So
I am curious for those listening, like, if you could post in Slack or on YouTube live comments, if there's an SCA vendor you're using that you actually really like, I'd love to hear about that. I only, the major ones of. Anyways, I'm curious what. I already got feedback on the major ones. I'm curious about any SCA companies that are maybe lesser known that people are enjoying, or even ones that they that are better known. Whatever. If you're enjoying your SCA vendor, please let me know who they are, because I think we don't do SCA yet, or I don't plan on doing SCA right now. I don't. You can never say you're never going to go into a space, obviously, but I get asked about it, and I'd like to have a good answer for it. So, anyways,
Well,
that's why I'm selfishly using the podcast to obtain information from yours about what works and what doesn't. But that's a hard space to do. That's actually one of the reasons I've avoided it. Is like we are down a one path right now, and we just don't. I don't have the engineering bandwidth right now to go down that route. But also, it does take a lot of work, right, to get that right, and it's a very hard problem space. So I think maybe when you factor in, because this is talking about how we always talk about how applications have dependencies that are vulnerable, and the ecosystem issues and supply chain attacks and all that stuff. But I think one thing that I don't know that we really cover super well is how, to defend against those effectively, because it is such a difficult problem space.
It is, and I mean, it's hard to know what's actually exploitable too, and how to prioritize, right? The companies that I deal with, that I talk to, that we're helping them with their AppSec program. This is one of the things they struggle with the most. Is is this something that is just because a CVE is labeled as critical for a indirect dependency, is it something that they need to be concerned about, right? Like, what is the prioritization over new features, over, Log4j, over other things that are flying in, and then the noise that goes into it, right? Because you can only cry wolf so many times to developers and have them jump on a problem before they're going to start to ignore your tool, your reminders to update, your tickets, because everything can't be fixed in a 2-day period, right? Or a 3-day period, right?
Yeah.
So and this is where we run into that issue that the CVE ratings matter, but we've got to prioritize, and we do get into that a little bit later with the DataDog report here too. So
yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
So number two is going to be your favorite.
It is. Attack attempts from automated security scanners are mostly unactionable noise. I love this, right? So one of the talks that I've been given recently is like modern versus old school, right? Like, why are we in the space that we are nowadays, right? Like, and how did we get here? And one of the points that I always bring up is that what we generate, and this goes back to what we were just talking about as well, what we generate as far as like the security team or the application security, or like, the noise that we generate and send to the rest of the organization has importance, right? And in the past, we've often inflated these values, or we've inflated the noise to show our value, to show how effective we are, even though automated security scanners in general, like the attack attempts and what we're actually blocking, is mostly unactionable, crap, right? Like you can't do anything with it, right? You stand up any device on the internet nowadays, and within minutes, if not seconds, you're going to get scanned for things like SSH and just common vulnerabilities. You got malware that's out there that's looking for a place to land. They're looking for misconfigurations. They're looking for an easy target. But when we take that information and we put it into our executive reports to show like how effective we are, all we're doing is inflating our own ego when we really haven't done anything. And it also gets to this point of, when we do that, we discount the actual attacks, the actual actionable noise, and whether or not we are putting our resources into the right place. Right? I don't know. Okay, what is your take on this one, right?
Similar. I mean, it's sort of like, well, first of all, yeah, 0.0065% successfully triggered a vulnerability. That sounds about right. None of that surprises me whatsoever. It doesn't matter the tool. They mentioned popular examples include Nuclei, zgrab, SQL Map. It really doesn't matter. Although SQL Map I tend to only use once there's actually like potentially SQL injection there. But yeah, you're letting the world run these tools against you. So it's not even like necessarily highly qualified people with background and experience that are running these tools too. So you're going to have what I'm trying to say is a high volume of maybe not as knowledgeable people running a lot of noise. And so it makes sense that it's such a low number. It also makes sense that it's such a low number because scanners, especially dynamic scanners, just tend to not do a great job these days. They tend to struggle. We've just seen that over and over and over again. It's why we put so much into code reviews. and even then shy away from tools. So I don't know. None of that's surprising at all.
Mm-mm.
This is actually what I would expect. Maybe a little bit. No, that's about what I'd expect.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, right? Like, when was the last time you really paid attention to those attack attempts, right? And what I want to get away from, and I mean, this is probably what Datadog is, keying in on is, hey, the only thing that you need to look at from those attack attempts is when something comes back that's different, right? When it looks like there is actual exploitation. Promoting those numbers that you blocked 10 million attack attempts a day because someone did an Nmap scan against your network is not, it's disingenuous, right? Like it's not relevant information when it's not something special that you did. You stood up a firewall and then you detected that someone was scanning your network. It's not necessarily an attack attempt, right? Like we inflate that to make ourselves look good as a security organization or whatever it is. But anybody that's in the industry is just going to roll their eyes a little bit and move on because we know that that's not the case. And their take here, vast majority are harmless and only generate noise. So take it with a grain of salt. But let's find different ways to actually show that value, right? Like, it'd probably be more interesting to look at this, break down this 0.0065%, because out of millions or tens of millions of attack attempts, that's not an insignificant, like a completely insignificant number. There's still some research that needs to be done there, but I'd rather see, oh, we saw this happen, this was our response to it, so this is why it wasn't an attack, or why we had it generated some sort of an incident. That becomes more interesting to us and to the developers at large, right? Like, hey, this is something that is actually actionable. That's what we want to get to.
I mean, then that kind of points to the fact number 3 that they list, which is only a small portion of identified vulnerabilities are worth prioritizing, because like you kind of just alluded to it, where it's like, well, even if you find, even if there are vulnerabilities, it doesn't mean that like you need to do anything with them necessarily. It depends on what the vulnerability is. Um, we've good like how many low to medium findings would you by nature have to put on a report, but like in a real world sense, if someone said, hey, you have the next hour to secure this app, like would never even register on your priority list. You wouldn't even think about them. I mean, I'm not speaking to your personal reports, but I'm just saying, like, when you've worked for consulting places, yeah, we've all written out 13, 15, 17 finding reports where like pretty much 2 of those findings mattered, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just legitimate, honest answer. If we're being real with ourselves. So
Well,
this
and
is surprising
yeah,
to me either.
no, it's not, right? Like, and this is part of what goes into the prioritization, like the severity ratings that we as Redpoint put on reports as well. And I can't tell you the number of times that we get on calls with developers and they look at it and they're like, you got 15 things on here. And I'm like, yeah, there's 15 items, but it's mainly because we have to report on everything that we see, right? As a third party, I have to report on it because I know that it's going to show up in your latest sneak, analysis or whatever SaaS tool that you're running or SCA tool. If I don't report on it, then it's going to reflect badly on us as an organization. But what I'm going to tell you is, yeah, we looked at these CVEs. There's not actual exploitation here. This is something to be put on the backlog, and being reasonable about expectations and prioritization will get you so far with those development organizations. If you're like, if you take it with a grain of salt. And apparently that's my phrase for the day. Take it all with a grain of salt, right? It's not that deep, right? Is the other way to say that. But prioritization comes into place so quickly when you're dealing with a small team, or I mean, honestly, with any development team, because they only have so much effort to spend in this, right? And this goes back to that SCA, the SCA analysis further up with Java and everything else. You've got to have some way to actually prioritize your your vulnerabilities, your reports, like what it is that you're actually putting in there, and recognize that there's people on the other side that are consuming that and trying to actually do the right thing.
Yeah, that's true. And I did want to like point out, they mentioned that there's 3 things that make something, or generally make a vulnerability more serious. So if the impacted service is publicly exposed. Of course, yeah, from like a pure external, no foothold into the perimeter perspective, yeah, that for sure, I would agree that elevates the risk. The vulnerability is running in production. Yeah, that's a no-brainer if it's in prod. Though sometimes people accidentally leave their staging environments open, and those can be, you're not necessarily, I'm not saying that you're going to, I mean, it depends on what's in the database, but you're probably not necessarily, if they're doing a good job there, getting like exfiltration of the database, but you might be getting, a foothold into the perimeter. But generally speaking, vulnerability in production. The last one is a little iffy because it says, there is exploit code publicly available. This, to me, this is more about third-party developed code rather than first-party developed code. So when I say first-party, I mean obviously in-app code that's written by the developers for that specific application versus, transitive third-party code where they've just included a dependency, and then maybe they have that dependency and a bunch of sub-dependencies now all running code inside their application. So for the third-party side, that makes more sense, the exploit code being publicly available. For first-party code, I mean, really, going back to like the small handful of issues that tend to be the things we want to prioritize, no, that's absolutely like, that's usually not going to have publicly available code. It's going to have like some 3 or 4 different mistakes made by developers and maybe some logic issues going on that are like, oh, this is a chained set of horrible things. Or, maybe it's just like a 1-line mistake in some authorization logic or whatever it might be, but it's typically not like a public CVE. So anyways, just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's those questions are things that you should be able to answer before you prioritize anything, or before you even rate a vulnerability, right? Or an exploit, right? But I did hear that the LLMs can now exploit code as long as it's available online. So
it's true.
87% effective, and
I seen it.
I seen it. I think I read an article earlier today. Yeah. Yeah, this was interesting though too. Like after organizations by percent of their critical vulnerabilities that remain critical after adjustment, that's pretty telling, right? Like if you actually take those 3 things into account, then only 5% of those critical vulnerabilities are really critical. That sounds about right to me, right? Adjusting for context just eliminates those. And I don't know. This is one of my, how am I going to say this? This is one of my pet peeves when dealing with organizations that don't have a prioritization matrix or process internally when they're consuming third-party reports, right? So when I'm looking at an application, or we are as an organization, we're typically scoped to that specific application, which means like we have no context. We only have context as far as like, this is what the application is, this is what the role the users can do or should be able to do, and this is what they can't do. So when we find something, we're able to elevate privileges, we're able to do X, Y, and Z, we're going to rate that within that context, right, of the application in and of itself. Hey, we're expecting this to be a critical vulnerability for this application, right? That's the context that we're coming into it with. But I can't tell you the number of times that like we get on the horn, or we get on like the readout call, we're going through the vulnerabilities, and they're like, yeah, can we lower this vulnerability to a medium, right, from a critical? And typically we're willing to do that, like with some context and with some flavor that's in there. But what it tells me as an outsider or a third party that's assessing your applications is that you don't have an internal process to actually prioritize and vet vulnerabilities that are coming from all the different sources that you have. It's part of it's an app, not an application. It's an organization maturity metric is basically what it boils down to for me. If you're having third parties re-rank their vulnerabilities because of context outside of the scope of the application or the code that they're looking at. And I don't know, like, I mean, I know you've seen that in the past as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen people do a poor job of prioritization, aggregation, things of that nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what other takeaways I have on this one. Other than this stupid mosquito will not leave me alone, dude. I'm like trying to kill this thing, and it will not leave me alone. Sorry, those listening and watching, but it's driving me nuts. Yeah, no, but you're right. I agree. I was trying to think of like what else on here is of interest to us. I mean, because they talk. Yeah. It's actually interesting because they talk about like 5 and 6 are kind of interesting because 5 is like adoption of infrastructure as code is high and varies across cloud providers. But then fact number 6 was, but manual cloud deployments are still widespread. So yeah. Anyways, I don't know. That was just the 2 titles were interesting. I mean, they say lightweight container images lead to fewer vulnerabilities. That makes sense. It's less stuff that you're pulling in. 71% of organizations use. So the number is lower in Google Cloud. Yeah, I mean, is anyone using Google Cloud? I mean, I'm sure some people are using Google Cloud, but I just don't know any. Let's see, AWS, Terraform. Okay. All stuff I would expect. 14-day wait over soon. I don't know. That's manual cloud deployments are still widespread.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't really have much to. I mean, that's not. There's obvious reasons. I think they do point out a few good reasons to have infrastructure as code managing your cloud deployments. So if you're not familiar with that, that's having configuration files that you check into source code repositories and are used to push infrastructure, hence infrastructure as code. There are some benefits. So like all changes are peer reviewed. So yeah, if you make changes, you can submit a pull request, have people actually review those changes before you go into your cloud setup and start mucking with things. Really helpful too if you have like SOC or any other compliance related requirements. Human operations have limited permissions on prod environments since deployments are handled by a CI/CD pipeline. Yeah, I mean, ideally, I don't know that that's always true, but yeah, ideally, humans would have limited permissions. Organizations can scan infrastructure as code for weak configurations. That's true. There are IAC scanners out there. That definitely is a thing. So I would, this all makes sense. I guess the last one does resonate with me though, the number 7, where it says usage of short-lived credentials and CI/CD pipelines is still low. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, so when I was at GitHub, we implemented OIDC for AWS and for Microsoft, so Azure and AWS. And they actually mentioned GitHub Actions here too. Across organizations using GitHub Actions, representing over 31% of organizations running in AWS, we found only 37% exclusively use keyless authentication based on short-lived credentials. Short-lived credentials are very important. OIDC is a very important step forward. It does allow federation to those environments so that you don't have like a human being's, IAM user, a human being's credentials. Those tend to be, or even just like a role or something like that, where those credentials are long-lived. And, if they're breached, they're you've got to go through a rotation cycle, cleanup. Keyless authentication is definitely the way to go here. Does not surprise me that it's still a problem, that there's still quite a bit of folks using long-lived keys. I will say, like, when we put our scanner online for secrets analyzers, like we found in the first, I guess we put it online on a Friday, and by Monday we had 3 valid, very bad things that were found
Bad
detected in the
exposures.
source code. Yeah.
Yep.
So like, this is a good reason to keep your credentials non-persistent, non-long-lived, and use like OIDC if possible, or some other federation service.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, from a AppSec perspective or a code perspective, this is one that, again, it's not surprising to me, right? Like, and that's kind of my takeaway from the whole report from DataDog in general is it's confirmation of gut feel of what we see on a daily basis, right? That, yes, there's things that are good, but there's these issues that are out there. We're overinflating, attacks, like external attacks, anonymous attacks that are coming in. SCA is still an issue. Having context is more effective when dealing with vulnerabilities and prioritizing them. Limiting what's available to an application via the operating system or via the image reduces the exploitation factor or the attack surface, right? Like, I mean, this is all, it feels kind of straightforward, but it's nice to see the actual numbers behind it, that it's not just my gut take, but it is something that is concrete.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep. Datadog, application security manager, SCA. Say, yeah, because Datadog has a software composition analysis feature too. Everyone does nowadays. Yes.
Do they? I didn't even know that.
Yep. Apparently, that's here. Let's see. Woohoo! Oh, did it keep sharing that? No, sharing the other screen. Right. Yep. Anyhow, cool.
At the bottom, you're covering through it. They do talk about like how they kind of went about doing some of this analysis if you're interested.
Mm-hmm. Fact 6, CloudTrail logs, OIDC, CloudTrail logs. Cool. Yeah, I mean, we've been going for about an hour, Ken. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about, either related to this article or anything else before we call it for today?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Do we have any? Were there any interesting events or news things that happened that maybe? I mean, I've been traveling, so I might have missed out on interesting things.
I mean, we've kind of talked about some of those. Let's see, what else did I have pulled in here? Like professionals. Oh, there's the cookie theft one that the fighting cookie theft, like the new device bound cookies that Chromium is proposing. Dang this. I mean, it's interesting. Maybe we can just touch on it briefly here.
We don't have to either. I was curious if there's any because sometimes I'll go a week and then people will be like, oh, some big thing happened last week. I'm like, oh God. All right. Well, I'm now out of the loop officially on everything.
Not necessarily, right? Like the last week hasn't been that active inside of, or like in the AppSec space. I'm sure that will change today now that I said something, right? But
that's good. No news is good news.
No news is good news. I mean, obviously, there's always articles. If you come up with something, if you have something that you would like us to address, please jump into Slack and join us there. You can find the invite link on absoluteappsec.com. Or
you want to hear something wild?
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, dude. I think I cut out. I was going to say it's 3 months until Vegas, or almost a little over 3 months.
Yeah.
So it's time to start booking stuff if you're like me and you haven't booked yet.
Yeah. 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 If I'm booked, a month before, I'm doing well, I'll be honest. Problem right now is how long are we going to be there? Right. Like that's always my,
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm probably going to be there for a long time this year, but
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Yep. If you're going for Black Hat or for B-Sides Vegas before DEF CON, and then we're staying after to do training, right? Like it ends up being a really long week anyway. Sweet. We'll dig into the Chromium stuff next week. It's a novel technique for actually like basically signing cookies based on the browser to prevent cookie theft. So you couldn't like necessarily pick it up and take it somewhere else, even with malware. It's cool,
make
right? Like
scripting payloads more annoying.
Even less. Yeah. Yeah. It'll make them even less effective, right? Like, yeah. Anyhow. Cool, man. All right. Well, next week we have Brian Schmidt on, and then more guests are on their way. But again, if you come up with a topic or you have a guest that you would like to see on the podcast, either reach out to Seth or Ken at absoluteappsec.com or jump into Slack and DM us, and we'll start that process. We're always interested to talk to new people in the industry and to get to know what people are working on. So reach out. Cool. All right. Cheers. Thanks everybody for listening today, and we will catch you all online.